Hello, my name is Alfredo Salmon Mijage from Edukea Tanzania. Welcome in today's session to see or to start the new topic, which is the third topic in Form 5 history, which is the people of African origin in the New World. It means that this is our study topic in Form 5, specifically in history, which is the topic known as the people of African origin in the New World. So our topic will cover or will deal with three subtopics, which is the first one is leaders of slavery and the slave trade. The second one is black solidarity and the black and back to African movements, and the last one will be the civil rights movement. So we are going to see these subtopics. So we are going to see one after another. So we are going to start with the leaders of slavery and the slave trade. By starting with the short explanation about the New World, so we are going to see the short explanation about the New World. The New World in this context, it means the New World in this context refers to the United States of America and the Caribbean islands where most of the people of African origin were found. It means that in this context, the New World refers to the United States of America and the island of Caribbean, where most of black people or people of African origin were found. The people of African origin in the New World were a product of transatlantic slave trade. It means that the people of African origin in the New World were the result or the impact or product of transatlantic slave trade. This trade led to the exportation of many Africans in the form of slaves to America to provide cheap labor on plantations and mines. It means that the black people or the people of African origin in the New World were the product of transatlantic slave trade, and that trade led to the exportation of many Africans as slaves or in form of slaves to America and provide labor or cheap labor in the plantations and mining centers which were established after the discovery of New World in 1492 by Christopher Columbus. So let us see the genesis or origin or reasons of the African people in the New World, or the genesis or origin of African people in the New World or slavery. It means we are going to see the reasons that made the black people to be in the New World. To me, the first reason was mercantilism. This was an economic system which involved conducting trade overseas, searching for gold and silver. It means that the first reason or origin or the genesis of African people in the New World was mercantilism. Mercantilism was economic policy which involved the conducting of overseas trade, searching for gold and silver. Mercantilism led to the rise of the transatlantic slave trade, which was a trading activity which involved Africa, Europe, and America. It means that mercantilism led to the rise of transatlantic slave trade, which was involved in the three continents, Africa, Europe, and America. During this trade, millions of Africans were exported or were taken from Africa to America in order to provide cheap labor in the plantations and mining centers which were established in the New World by the European powers. The second reason or origin of the African people origin in the New World was booming capitalist agriculture. It means that the development of capitalist agriculture in the New World. During mercantilism, European capitalists established different plantations of coffee, sugarcane, cotton, and the tobacco, which called for massive supply of cheap labor. It means that during mercantilism, European countries were established different projects or plantations and mining centers. Plantations which were established included like coffee plantations, sugarcane plantations, coffee plantations, cotton plantations, and the tobacco plantations, which were needed the massive supply of cheap labor to work on those plantations. Thus, the supply of white labor was getting difficult compared to the expanding needs of the plantation. It means that the surplus of the white labor in America was become difficult and become the problem, and the other alternative or the new alternative which was decided to be done by the Europeans was to come in Africa and to export the Africans to provide the cheap labor in America on the plantations and the mining centers which were established. Thus marked the beginning of African people origin in the New World. The third reasons or origin or genesis was industrial revolution in Europe. It means that the development or the rise of industrial revolution in Europe was another genesis or origin of African people origin in the New World. Due to the industrial revolution, there was a need to expand on markets that the merchants and the ruling class in Europe were afraid of under oppression. This prompted the campaign against the use of white labor. The class called for massive importation of slaves from Africa to provide cheap labor on plantations. It means that the industrial revolution needed the expand of all markets, whereby the manufactured goods were made, and those manufactured goods were there to get the market in which area in Africa. And the industrial revolution aimed at getting the raw materials which could be fed in the industries, and there were white labor who were expensive in getting them. So the main aim or the main alternative that Europeans come up with, it was to export the Africans from their countries in Africa and to America in order to work or to provide the cheap labor in the plantations which were established. And the Europeans feared that if they will take the white labor to America, their countries will remain underpopulated. So that's why they decided to come in Africa to export the slaves from Africa to provide cheap labor on the plantation. And that was the beginning of African people origin in the New World. Another origin or genesis was African slaves were cheap. It means that the African labor were cheap compared to the European labor. It's on record that money paid to a white labor for 10 years could procure an African slave for life. It means that it is on record that the payments which were given to the white labor during that time could be used by the African slave for life. It means that the white labor were expensive. So that's why they decided to come take Africans who were cheap. In addition, a white worker was expected to acquire land at the end of the contract, while an African slave was prevented by laws from owning land. It meant that, in addition, the white worker or white labor was expected to acquire the land at the end of the contract, while an African labor was prevented by the law to own the land in the New World. This condition necessitated the use of African labor, thus the existence of people of African origin in the New World. Another genesis or origin was discovery of maritime technology or discovery of marine technology. This acted as the pushing factor for Africans to be taken as slaves. Maritime technology eased transportation and guided the merchants to locate Africa. It means that the development of marine technology in Europe actually are the pushing factor for Africans to be taken from their countries to America or to the New World in order to provide the cheap labor in the plantations and mining centers, because marine technology eased the transportation and guided the merchants to locate Africa. It means by using the bearing compass and the bearing direction. Compass bearing and the compass direction. These were guiding the merchants to locate Africa and thus be in possession to transport people of African origin to the New World. Another was inability of the indigenous people. It means that another origin or genesis of African people origin in the New World was the inability of the indigenous people or inability of Lady Indies in the New World. Initially, the Europeans were using the Native Americans and Lady Indians to provide cheap labor on the plantations and mining centers, but these later died in huge numbers due to the plague or due to the plague. It means that at the first time when the plantations and the mining center were established in the New World, the Europeans merchants were using the Native Americans and the Lady Indians to provide the cheap labor. And when the time went on, those people or the native people were died because of the disease called plague. This called for an importation of African slaves, which contributed to the existence of people of African origin in the New World. It means that the inability of the Lady Indies and the Americans or Native Americans in New World led to the contribution of exportation of importation of African slaves from Africa to the New World, and that's why marked the beginning of people of African origin in the New World. Another was the discovery of New World. This is the last genesis or reasons for the presence of African people origin in the New World. The discovery of the New World by Christopher Columbus in 1492 contributed to the existence of people of African origin in the New World. It means that the discovery of the New World by the Christopher Columbus in 1492 made the existence of people of African origin in the New World, because there were establishments of different plantations and mining centers in America or in New World by the European powers, as Christopher Columbus sent back the information about the New World which was discovered. So the European nations largely first to come and invest different agricultural plantations and mining centers, and the discovery led to the establishment of plantations and mining centers that demanded for cheap labor, which called for importation of African slaves, and thus marked the beginning of the presence or existence of African people origin in the New World. After looking the origin or genesis of black people or African origin people in the New World, let us see the problems faced by the people of African origin in the New World. What were the problems that faced the people who were present in the New World, or black African who were in the New World? The people of African origin faced various problems which were caused by the development of capitalism. It means that the people or the African origin or people of African origin in the New World were facing various problems which were caused by the development of capitalism. The Europeans maintained certain conditions to ensure the survival of capitalism at the expense of the people of African origin. It means that the European countries or the Europeans maintained the development or maintained the certain conditions that aim at ensuring the survival of capitalism at the expense of the use of people of African origin. These problems were classified or can be classified into political, economic, and social aspects or social problems. It means that the problems which were faced the peoples of African origin in the New World can be classified or categorized under 3 categories, which is political, economic, and social problems. By starting with the political problems, the first political problems was denial or denied the right to vote and to be voted. It means that the people of African origin in the New World were denied or had no right to vote or to be voted. The people of African origin were denied the right to vote. Various measures were put that made it difficult for the black Africans or black people to vote. The qualifications to vote include one should have attained a certain level of income and had a grandfather who was eligible to vote. It means that the Europeans or the people of America who were the native and the Europeans who were in New World settled some measures which put difficulties to the black people to vote in the New World. It means that they put some qualifications for the black people in the New World to vote, like one should have attained the certain level of income. It means that the property qualification was mattered during in voting or in participating political matters, especially voting or to be voted, as well as the one had to be the one had was supposed to have grandfather or to have grandfather who had the qualification to vote or who was eligible for vote or to vote. That was the political problem number 1. Another was the denied equal representation. To mean that the black Africans were denied to have the representative in the parliaments or in the member of parliaments. People of African origin were denied equal representation in the governments. To make the matters worse, they were even denied the right to run for political office, hence they had no representatives in the governments. It means that the Africans or the black Africans in the New World were denied the right to have their representative in the governments in the New World. So you can see that the Africans were denied also the right to run the political office or political organization in the New World. So you can see how the people of African origin are faced that or different problems. Another was denied the right to make decisions. It means that the Africans people or the black Africans in the New World were denied the right to make decisions. It means that they had no right to make their own decisions. People of African origin were denied the right to make decisions in the New World. They lost all rights as human beings, and they could not even make decisions regarding their own lives. So these were the political problems that were faced the Africans or people of African origin in the New World. So let us proceed with the economic problems. Economic problems. The first one was denied the right to own land. The black Africans in the New World denied to own or denied the right to own the land. It means that the Africans or Africans who were in the New World were prohibited to own the land. People of African origin were denied the right to own the land. They were forbidden by the law to own the land or any other property. It means that the black Africans in the New World, they lost or forbidden by the law to own the land or other property. This rendered them to be only domestic servants in the New World, and that made them to remain as domestic servants in the New World. Another economic problem was poor condition or poor working conditions. Poor working conditions. It means that people of African origin were exposed to poor working conditions on the plantations and mining center owned by the whites. They signed contracts with planters where they agreed to offer labor on conditions similar to those of slavery. On the plantations, people of African origin were more often punished by the planters and were paid low wages, and in some cases they were not paid at all. It means that people of African origin was exposed to poor working conditions, and the European nation or the planters or the whites were forcing the Africans to sign the contracts with the planters that they were agreed to offer their labor on the conditions similarly to the slaves. On the plantations, people of African origin were more often punished by the planters and were paid low wages, or sometimes they could not be paid at all. So you can see how the Africans or black Africans in the New World were facing by the various economic problems. After looking economic problems, let us see the social problems. The first one was racial discrimination. It means that the black Africans, because of having the black skin color, were segregated or were discriminated because of their race. The people of African origin were subjected to racial discrimination in all aspects of life. Laws were established which restricted people of African origin to live in separate and inferior sections of hospital, cemeteries, and the toilet facilities. It means that the people of African origin were subjected to racial discrimination in all aspects of life, whereby in New World there were laws which were enacted or established restricted people of Africa or people of African origin to live separate with the white people in the New World. And the services which were provided in the New World were discriminated. For example, in the hospitals, the black Africans were given the poor health services compared to the white people. Even in education, the Africans or the black Africans in the New World were not supposed to get education service. So you can see that how Africans in the New World were suffering. Another was education. The people of African origin faced different problems in the education system. It means there was segregation in the education system whereby black people were denied admission in secondary schools, colleges, and universities because of their race. It means that the black Africans in the New World were segregated or were discriminated in getting the education service. So you can see that the Africans were prohibited or were segregated in the admission to secondary schools, colleges, and at the same time universities in the New World. So the black people in the New World were highly segregated and subjected to social problems like that. Another social problem was the denial or denied the right to marry. It means that the black Africans were denied the right to marry. They are not supposed to marry. Black people were denied the right to marry and to be married. It means that the black Africans were not supposed to marry or to be married. The capitalists believed that marriage would hinder the exploitation of African labor, since it would become expensive to maintain the black people and their families. It means that the capitalists believed that marriage would hinder the exploitation of African labor, since it would be difficult for them to maintain or to provide the service to the black Africans and their families, or to their children who would be born. Laws were also established that prohibited relations between a black and white man. It means that also laws in the New World were enacted or were established that prohibited the relation between the black people and white people. So due to the problems which were socio-economic and political problems, the people of African origin began to wage struggles for equality, economic power, and civil rights. It means that due to those problems which were facing the black Africans in the New World, they decided to wage on different struggles for equality, economic power, and civil rights which were lost in the New World. The development of class consciousness among the people of African origin was caused by the numerous factors that contributed to the rise of black Americans or black American nationalism. It means that the development of class consciousness means that there was emergence of class that were consciousness and awareness about their rights and other services which were supposed to get, and that emergence class or emerging class of consciousness was caused by the numerous factors that contributed to the rise of black American nationalism. And the black American nationalism, it means black American nationalism, that was the struggle for the black African origin in the New World to attain their rights or social, political, and economic rights which were lost in the New World, and that were subjected by the white people. The origin of black American nationalism was the exploitation and the oppression to which the black people were subjected. It means that the origin of black American nationalism was exploitation and the oppression to which the black people were subjected. This situation forced the black people to identify themselves as the group apart. It means that this situation, as they were facing different problems in the New World, they decided or forced the black people to identify themselves what they were facing in the New World, and they decided to form different groups or movements in order to fight against the economic, political, and social problems in the New World. So the black American nationalism manifested itself. It means that the black American nationalism manifested itself in different forms, such as Back to African movement, Pan-Africanism movement or Pan-African movement, and the civil rights movements. It means that it means that the black American nationalism was manifested through formation of different movements like Back to African movement, Pan-African movement or Black Solidarity, and the civil rights movements which were formed under the supervision of black African leaders in order to liberate the black Africans who were present in the New World. So you can see that how the black Africans who existed in the New World were started to gain consciousness and the awareness on the rights which were subjected or denied by the white people in the New World. So in one way or another, that's why so after looking the Black American nationalism and how they formed the various movements in order to liberate themselves from oppression and humiliation as well as exploitation by the whites. So I would like to wind up the session and to leave the question, which is what were the genesis of the people of African origin in the New World, and the second one, vividly substantiate the problem facing the people of African origin in the New World. So until there, this is the end of our lesson. I would like to thank you being with me until the end of the session. I welcome you in the next lesson. Thank you.
Purchase your tracks today.